Hello and welcome to Front Porch Radio. I'm Julie Wilder, and today we're diving into the world of herbalism, holistic living, and the power of plants with two truly inspiring guests. First, we have Maggie O'Halloran, a passionate educator, dedicated herbalist, and the executive director of the Florida School of Holistic Living. She's also the force behind the Florida Herbal Conference, bringing people together to learn, grow, and connect through plant medicine. Maggie's journey started with a single book in the 90s, and now she's inspiring others to discover the magic of herbs in their own lives. Joining her is Ricky Tree, a true steward of the land, and, as he puts it, basically a professional plant person. Ricky runs Botanica Organica, a thriving community apothecary in South Florida, and has spent the last decade immersed in herbal studies, gardening, farming, and permaculture. Whether tending plants, teaching others, or wandering the forests of North America in deep contemplation, Ricky lives and breathes the wisdom of the natural world. Today, we'll explore the incredible history and mission of the Florida School of Holistic Living, the vision behind the Florida Herbal Conference, and how you, yes, you, can take your first steps into the world of plant medicine. Plus, we'll get a sneak peek at this year's conference and the exciting things ahead for 2025. So grab a cup of tea, get cozy, and settle in because you won't want to miss this conversation. Welcome to the Front Porch, Maggie and Ricky.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so glad. Maggie, you're no stranger to the Front Porch Radio. You've been a guest back in the first iteration of back when I used to do this, 7 years ago? Now
I'm as very vague and amorphous.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. But we're talking about one of my particular passions. I'm actually a graduate of the Roots program of the Florida School of Holistic Living, which was in the backyard of my former cafe, Dandelion Community Cafe, and gone through so many changes, as we all have with the pandemic and everything like that. We're going to get to the Florida School of Holistic Living and the conference, but I really would love to start just with a conversation about how you got on the path, the plant path, if you will, and just some maybe, what did we say? Antidotes? Not antidotes. Anecdotes. I had to figure out the word before about, because there was a couple of times where we're like, oh my God, plants are magic. And sometimes it solves things that our traditional Western healthcare system doesn't even have on their radar. So anyway, that's just a long little intro to say, tell me how you got on this path. Maggie, we'll start with you.
Sure, Julie. I think it was inevitable. I was a kid growing up in South Louisiana that refused to wear shoes. Outside, being with nature and singing to the plants was my happiest place to be, and it kind of still is. But I also spent some time as a volunteer at a mental health hospital for children. And I was really inspired to think about ways beyond our traditional methods of heavily medicating kids to the point of zombies, to meet very real needs, right? Those needs still exist. I think I was a little bit more optimistic about what plants can do back then than I am now. But it really inspired me to think about how else I could work with plants other than really enjoying being outside with them.
Yeah.
And that led me on a path of not just that first herb book, but living in groups of people in Northwest Arkansas and the Ozarks where herbs were just healthcare. That was it. It was a point of access for healthcare. And I got to see fields of echinacea plants that people would lean on if they weren't feeling well, and other plants like mullein, and hear about the historical uses of them that led me beyond anything I could ever read in a book. Having that really deep connection point. And then in the 30 years since that first book, I've gotten to see so many times when plants showed up in a way that is beyond anything I could have read about in a book, right? People always ask, how do you know plants work? And I'm like, have you had a cup of coffee lately? Because I think that's a really good way to think about it. Caffeine works, and all of our plant friends have different ways of supporting us in the world that we currently live in. And not that long ago, again, time is vague and amorphous, but my sweet, kind, thoughtful, dear partner in life, husband Brian, fell off the roof And
I remember that.
yeah, it was an intense moment in time. And I was able to lean on some of these plant friends that I knew well from Northwest Arkansas to support his healing journey alongside what, of course, the emergency room could do to help him. And everyone was amazed at how quickly he healed and the level of healing he was able to attain in his leg. And even though he's bionic with a metal rod, he's out backpacking and hiking still. And I really believe it was the plant medicine that allowed that for him and all the other things that we were doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ricky, tell us your path story.
Hold on, let me take that in. That was beautiful.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
So for me, I kind of wish I was singing to the plants and such things in my youth. I was influenced a little bit more by like social pressures and things like that. Like not pressures, I say, just like the way kids are, and the way that I suppose the way that I grew up like near and around a city. Although I didn't grow up in the city, I grew up in this like 8-acre piece of property that my parents like wanted to farm, and my dad wanted to like live the life of like having chickens and that whole thing. And but they came from, New Jersey, where it's like city life for real. So it was like not super real, but I remember being out in the field, like chasing grasshoppers and like noticing this plant that I always thought was dandelion, which ended up being Biden's. And I started wrestling and doing martial arts and stuff. And that kind of like took me away from the time that I spent outside. And for a big part of my adolescence and early adulthood was like competitive training in mixed martial arts and wrestling and jujitsu and like that whole world of, just athletics. And I got hurt. And so I like to say that my story is one of the wounded warrior. I finally got to slow down enough to like smell the flowers. And while I was healing, I had to get this like orthoscopic surgery on my hip that wasn't a severe surgery, but I had to be in bed for 6 weeks with this like machine moving my leg back and forth. And during that time, I watched kind of like all the TED Talk videos and YouTube videos that I could on like meditation and healing with the mind and like alternative healing. Because doctor was like, yeah, you're not going to grow back your cartilage. And I was like, yeah, I am. And
don't tell me what to do.
What I'm saying. You're not going to be running any marathons, he said, or whatever. And so, I started getting into that. And that's like in that world is where I discovered yoga. And yoga just introduced me to a whole new community of people. It introduced me to this concept, this world of study called Ayurveda, that I just like touched during those times. But of course, it was a young lady that I met in that community that introduced me to her aromatherapy teacher, Miguel, super funny guy, Cuban man. He used to be a hairdresser turned herbalist. And he was an aromatherapist. And I walked into his herb shop, not very different than what my herb shop is like now. But he like aromatherapy, like essential oils heavy, focused. And he handed me a bottle of ylang ylang, and I remember smelling the bottle of ylang ylang, and like my whole world slowed down, right? And I felt my pulse, right? My circulation. I had never had that level of like presence with just like a whiff of something. And like that, like body awareness, instantaneous body awareness made me feel like I'm not leaving any stone, any leaf, any page unturned until I like know why I just experienced that. And that kind of like launched my like super deep study. I just went kind of crazy on studying and reading books and watching videos and taking classes and all of the things. And, I eventually found the Florida School of Holistic Living, like in a forest in Arcadia, at this place called the Forage Fest, where Emily Ruff was teaching a class, and she was talking about elder and gotu-kola and Biden's, plantago, just like basic herbal allies. But the way she spoke, she wasn't speaking about the plants, she was speaking to the plants. And that, like, I was like, I remember, I never forget, I walked up to her afterwards and I was like, I want to learn from you. And, you know, that led me to roots and the rest of it. And, you know, of course, I've studied not only at the Florida School, but I've taken several aromatherapy classes. I've studied with the Evolutionary School of Herbalism, taking a couple of their programs, and the Eclectic School of Herbalism in North Carolina. Like, I've done a lot of different studies since then. But yeah, just like, without taking up the whole show, I guess I'm just going to like rein it in there.
You're like, I am all about the plants. You know, it's interesting because I don't remember when my interest in herbalism, you know, funny enough, I'm just recalling my dad had like some sort of foot fungus and he was soaking his feet in Pau d'Arco, which is interesting because my dad and I have very little in common. And so I'm just realizing that kind of stuck out. But my mom also had like this like tea hobby, not like herbalist tea, but like regular English tea thing. And so I think in a bid to win my mother's approval, I opened a tea shop at Dandelion. But I was really interested in herbs just instinctively. And I was able to get that roots level certification because the school was right there. I mean, it just made all kinds of sense. But it wasn't until I was pregnant at the time, and I got like I had burned my arm like on the oven somehow. I don't know, like I had just had a burn, and I was like, "Hey, Kelly, do you have anything for a burn?" And so Kelly has her and her husband make all these incredible herbal medicines. And she's like, "Sure." And she just kind of wiped some on the burn. And then the next day, I realized that this burn was already like kind of bubbling, right? It was like it was a significant burn. And it was all gone except for this teeny sliver, which she had clearly just missed. And that little sliver took like 3 or 4 weeks to heal. But the rest of it looked like nothing had happened the very next day. And I was like, what is this magic? It's called Boo Boo Cream, the best Boo Boo Cream. And so that was very interesting to me. And then I got very ill, and I didn't have healthcare at the time. And so I was just struggling to figure out, I think in retrospect, I had like a mold exposure. Well, I know I had the mold exposure, but I think I was dealing with mold and then also maybe leaky gut. Again, never really could get like a diagnosis, but I was trying everything I could figure out. And it was Ayurveda that was the path out for me. My friend Richard was an Ayurvedic practitioner, and we just kind of talked and just doing some very simple Ayurvedic routines and lifestyle changes. And CCFT really repaired my gut. And I went from like basically a bizarro confused, like I felt like I had Alzheimer's or something like that. My mood was terrible. I was foggy brained. It's probably what a lot of people who have long COVID deal with, that just chronic inflammation and mast cell activation. And yeah, using something as simple as, you know, cumin, coriander, and fennel every day to line your gut and get started. That was the path out for me of really understanding. I liked Ayurveda because it took it from not just specific herbs, but also texture and timing, which I hadn't realized was like I just hadn't fully embodied all that. So yeah, so it's just been amazing to me to see, especially navigating the pandemic, right? It's been fascinating in the herbalist world. Let's talk about that for a second. I know we didn't plan on talking about it, but what has it been like in the herbalist community? Like, what have we seen some responses? Because I mean, it sounds like both of you guys are not afraid to go to the hospital if you need to go to the hospital, right? It's, you know, Western medicine has its place.
Definitely.
Yeah. But what
100%.
what has it been like? Because the pandemic was a real test. And I know herbalism came in clutch in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I really feel like from a personal perspective, I was definitely leaning into the nervines, or these herbs that really help calm the nervous system. And as a community, the Florida School of Holistic Living had always been so committed to being in person. And needing to shift to an online version of us and having so many more people interested in having access, because 2020, there weren't as many online opportunities to study herbalism with an herbalist. That Google's been around for a while, but having access, we definitely saw people that were seeking information and really wanting to know how to take care of themselves in a way that folks, 150 years ago knew how to take care of themselves.
It was common knowledge.
Right. They had these herbs in the jar in the kitchen. There was at least one person in the home that knew how to manage all of those herbs there. And I really feel like with COVID and people having a little bit of fear about going out and being in the public space or even going to a doctor, I've definitely seen more people interested in understanding how the herbs interact in the body from a physiological perspective too.
Right.
It's beyond a cup of tea because they have a headache. They want to know why it's happening. So personal interest, and it's exciting for me because I think what really inspires me as an educator is wanting to get back to that place we were 150 years ago, just in the kitchen. There are a lot of things that I would like to explain
forward on, but
I don't want to pull that sentence back in.
Yeah, the same way air conditioning.
Clarify that a little bit. Let's everybody have
air conditioning, and the ability to vote is great. Yeah.
And
COVID. Wow. What a time. So specifically in the context of herbalism, there was just a huge explosion of interest, right? I feel like during the 10 years I was doing herbs before COVID, I was kind of like a witch doctor, kind of wizard, kind of outcast, this guy's a gardener. I would start talking about strawberries in my groups of friends, and one by one they would start leaving until I was talking to myself or the plants next around me. So I was okay, whatever, but this is my way. I feel like I'd rather talk to plants than talk to people. But then COVID, right? And then so on and so forth. And I feel like during and after COVID, now everybody's an herbalist. Mm-hmm. Everybody's a homesteader, right? I think COVID really put into perspective the importance of our human capacity to have at least some level of our health in our own hands.
Yeah.
And, I have a very hands-off perspective on the whole conspiracy of COVID and all the things that a lot of people talk about. But the fact that there is even this concept of the plandemic, right? And I say that in air quotes because I don't necessarily have an opinion on that. But I've observed that there is that opinion out there, right? And so just that in and of itself kind of take some trust away from this whole big medical industrial complex that is supposed to be taking care of people, and so a lot of the public started to realize what's going on here, and what can I do, right, for myself and my family. And I think the first thing that they can reach for is the plants that are growing outside their house, or their cupboard where they have, their teas and herbs, it's maybe a cup of chamomile tea goes a lot farther than they thought it did, now that we can study chamomile, or at least welcome chamomile as, beyond just a cup of tisane at the end of the day, rather it's actually a very potent tool to help us keep our bodies in balance, I think. And so, yeah, that's kind of what COVID happened. And then I opened the Botanica. I was gonna, my January 2020 was when I paid my first month of rent, for that spot. And then post conference, we were building the whole space, and then it was shut down, right? And I couldn't open my shop, because it was just nobody was out shopping, and it was tough for us to pivot to online because we had sunk all of the investment, stuff into the brick and mortar. And so the pivot wasn't as quick as it needed to be. But when we finally opened, it was it ended up being something super needed in our community, something that took really well to where we're at. And so I just think that, yeah, it's like COVID, I think, brought a lot of awareness to the power that we have for our own health, like in our own house, in our own homes, in our own yards.
Yeah, I think that self-reliance is important, not just, I can remember talking to some of the city officials when there's a local dairy farmer trying to get into the downtown farmers market. This is over probably 15, 20 years ago. And the director at the time was like, well, I already have a cheese purveyor in here. And and I was like, yeah, but this is like local, fresh. That's all imported. Like it's different. Like you can have both, but why are we denying this farmer? And I remember just talking to the city officials and being like, well, like what if like supply lines break down, and like at the time, like the guy was looking at me like I was nutso, right? But here we've seen, I mean, right now we're having like, the chicken, community is collapsing because of the avian flu, and so it's just always important to keep the knowledge alive, to have that self-reliance, and to be able to be empowered to take care of yourself the best that you can, so that you can avoid going to the doctor. That stuff can get expensive, but then you reserve, go in when you need to, of course. I'm not like, oh, just stay in the herbalist field and don't venture out, if you need additional support. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Front Porch Radio. My name is Julie Weiler. My guests today are Maggie O'Halloran, who's the executive director of the Florida School of Holistic Living, and Ricky Tree, who is the owner of Botanica Organica down in Davie, Florida. And we're talking today about herbalism, the importance of it. And, I really just want to talk for a second about the role the Florida School of Holistic Living has played. I remember one of the things that I was just thinking about is the grief care packages. So let's talk a little bit about Florida School's vision, and just kind of like what its role is in the community, and some of those kind of special projects that you guys have had your loving hands in.
Sure. I'd really like to acknowledge the start of the school. Was a guy who was an EMT, and he kept picking up the same people that had these health conditions that he felt could really be managed with herbal medicine and some diet lifestyle changes possibly, but herbal medicine could really be there for them. He started teaching classes in the back of Leaves and Roots, which is a local herb shop if you don't know about it. It's where I like to go. And Emily Ruff, Ricky has mentioned Emily Ruff. She has a heart and passion for working with plants and sharing the knowledge with people, and a real social advocate heart as well. And so from that perspective, she was one of his students and took the opportunity to take over the school. And at the time, it was called the School of Herbal Studies. And she really felt like it needed to be more broad than that. So she changed the name to Florida School of Holistic Living, which is our name now. And she sees the school, and I continue to hold that vision, that the school is a part of the whole picture. Health is not just about my organs and the blood in my body. It's about the people I'm around in my community and the impact I have in the world, and the impact that my community has on me. So there have been events that have happened in Central Florida that Emily spearheaded, the Grief Care Project, where I offered mom hugs to anyone who needed it because that's who I am. And she was calling up local nonprofits, and like the Zebra Coalition that has a different name now, but and we offered classes and these herbal bundles that you mentioned, Julie, that had different herbal blends in them. Some of them had chamomile, some were lavender, some were rose. And we would give them to people that didn't have any experience with working with herbs, but they had that moment where they were breathing in and being reminded of the air that they breathe and the importance of taking deep breaths. And the Grief Care Project was about that, just reminding people that they were being held by a bigger place. So Grief Care Project was about the emotional experience in our community. And Emily has definitely been a spokesperson for the plants in Central Florida, and spearheaded there was a bear watch program a few years ago that the state was installing a bear hunt, and she organized people and educated people around the significance and the impact that could have. And she initiated a saw palmetto research study, because part of the reason we have bears entering our neighborhoods is because this wonderful, powerful plant medicine was being harvested and sold in bottles at CVS. And that can be a gateway capsule, but it's not the same as letting the berry stay on the plant. And we continue to hold our role as voices for the plants as a part of what the school is doing. But if we were in an elevator and you asked me what the mission was, I would tell you that we are, we want to educate people to be advocates for themselves in their doctor's office. Like know enough about themselves and their the way they work to be able to feel empowered to make a cup of tea at home, because that symptom that's happening in their body, they know is connected to this other thing that they have power and control and autonomy in taking care of themselves in that way. It's deeply connected with food and access there. So I feel like holistic living, we teach things about growing plants and harvesting plants, and that's for food or medicine, and plant walks, where folks are learning about plants that they can eat or put in their teacup for medicine, and really encouraging people to hold on to that knowledge that has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the classes? Because I know that you have like a two-pronged approach. You have some for like the basically, I know we've talked about this a little bit before, like making everyone a home care herbalist, right? And then there's also like a professional like course line too. So let's just pretend everybody here is thinking about their families and their self. What are some of the courses that would be designed just for them?
Heck yeah. So so we have these, we call them our core curriculum classes. So there's Roots of Herbalism, and then Family Herbalist, and then Community Herbalist program. So you can imagine it as like a 3-step program, as well as individual classes. But Roots of Herbalism is a class that you come into for a weekend or a home study. We still do that online, where you're learning about roughly 20 plants that are growing probably outside your back door, or at least at your local botanical garden, Mead Botanical Garden, I should say, maybe not Lou, that you will be surprised by, and some that are in your culinary cabinet as well, that all have really long history of use as medicine in the body. Roots of Herbalism is designed to be both a beginner course as well as a space for folks that are interested in going on and maybe like hanging up a shingle and becoming an herbalist in the world, as a starting place to kind of get to know who we are as a school, get to meet me, decide whether they like me as an educator or not. And then after you graduate from the Roots of Herbalism class, there is the Family Herbalist program. My goal with that is giving people a chance to actually be in my home and hang out with my family and see how we incorporate herbs into our daily lives, from the garden to the kitchen, to cups of tea and tinctures, and folks learn about all of those things and how to make them for themselves, because the primary goal is that folks get to know a group of people that they can lean on and ask questions after class is over, and they feel like they have that cabinet of herbs that they can lean on when they have the sniffles or a low-grade fever or a bee sting or things that are more significant, like a hospital stay, and how they can balance out that experience with what they have at home. Then there's the Community Herbalist program that is designed it's not really a clinical program necessarily. It's more of a space where folks that feel like they have the knowledge of the family herbalist program and they're feeling really good about being at home, and all their friends are calling them about what to do for headaches and rashes, but they want to know a little bit more and they're not really sure what that's going to look like. So the community herbalist program, folks are given an opportunity to feel out teaching and gardening and working with their community members. In our free herbal consultation clinic, that's something that's coming up again in March, where they get to practice working with clients. We don't treat or diagnose anyone, and we spend a lot of time just talking about the importance of holding space for people and really thinking about the role of being an herbalist in the world. So that's the core classes. And really, there is no certification program. It's not like you graduate with a degree or something or letters behind your name, but it's a body of knowledge that we really feel like gives you a base of information. Ricky and I were just talking on our way over today about how I feel like I'm still learning. You know, I may have been studying this stuff for over 30 years, but I feel really new at it still because there's constantly things to learn and grow into. So we have individual classes that are designed for people like me or that are completely new to this idea. We have plant walks for people who are just interested in knowing what kind of plants are growing at their feet that they can eat or use in their teacup. We have medicine making classes if you're interested in how to make that salve like you had for your burn before, or oils or essential oils or hydrosols or, you know, plant things that you can make.
Yeah, I mean, I remember like when I took the Roots of Herbalism course, and I'm sure it's evolved over time, but I thought I was just going to learn about some herbs. And I actually got an introduction to the nervous system. And not in a way that, like if you had told me I was going to learn about that stuff, I would have thought, oh, that's going to be above my head, right? But it was very accessible.
Sure.
And I'm like, this is basic knowledge about our human bodies. Like this was taught like in elementary, middle, and high school.
Mm-hmm.
It was. Why do we have to like wait until we're adults to seek out specialized education about our different body systems? Because the way they teach it in science, it's not holistic. It's a very, okay, this is this isolated from everything else. But I remember I didn't understand that what I put in my body also like is what would come out. Like I didn't realize, I don't know, like I wasn't taught that like what you do to yourself and what the environment is going to create these outcomes. And it was this complete disconnect for me. And once I was like, oh, there's a system and these work together. And it was incredible to me because especially that Roots of Herbalism, it's you learn specific herbs, you get to meet them. You also learn about the basic body systems. And then you get to learn like how to make a salve, how to make a tincture. I mean, I know you just said this, but to me, it was so empowering to be like, oh, I can make my own medicine. And then to experience that medicine working better than anything I had ever bought at CVS.
Yeah.
Like that proof is in the doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
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 The holistic approach of the body systems coming together. Yeah, the holistic approach. And I feel like in the Family Herbalist program, I'm definitely thinking about the nervous system and the herbs that interact with that system, but how it's connected with the other systems of the body at the same time. Yeah.
I think that's something that the Florida School of Holistic Living does super well, taken several programs from several people. And I always say, especially to my students, like the Florida School is like where I learned how to like really make this stuff digestible, right? I feel like you guys, I suppose, however we can see that, do a really good job at making these things that some people can find like
overwhelming,
way too heady, you know, and really make it like visceral, experiential, like, oh my God, like this is not so, you know, I can know enough about the nervous system to like manage my nervous system, you know, unless of course things get super complicated, but you know, it's more common that things are not super complicated. You can just use some chamomile or whatever, you know.
Lemon balm is my favorite, Irvine.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I just wanted to plug that into the Florida school because I really think that from like many of the programs that I've taken, programs that I've taken with the Florida school have been like super well spoken. Like y'all are very articulate in helping like making it digestible, all of the things, because this stuff can get super heady. It can get super scientific, but that's not the language that most people speak, right? And so yeah, thank y'all for doing that and holding that up because it really makes it accessible.
Sure. I think that, thank you for saying that, Ricky. And I'm letting that fill up that spot in me that who needs to be filled up whenever I'm thinking about the spreadsheets I have to work on later, you know? So thank you for saying that. It's really nice to hear. I appreciate that. And really thinking about how, like, in my story, I was a classroom teacher. That's who I am. I'm like a teacher of elementary school students, and really thinking about how I can deliver information in a way that meets people where they are. Because what we really want to do at the Florida School of Holistic Living is create access to information in a way that is digestible, that people can use, that is not separate from daily life. Like, this is just what you can find in Publix if that's what you have access to. And I really feel like that is the heart of herbalism, is remembering that it's a part of who we are and it's not this thing that's separate, where I call modern medicine allopathic medicine. It's where allopathic seems separate, like it's a separate thing. It's where a lot of education comes, where if you're learning about the nervous system, you're given a piece of paper or a chart on a screen that just has the nerves. It doesn't show you the muscles and the organs and the skin and the way that the nutrients that you're consuming can impact the nervous system. So really thinking about how, if we're thinking holistic, how are we making it, that holistic vision, accessible to people? And I joke, you know, if it sounds like I'm talking to elementary school students, it's not you, it's me.
So,
yeah.
because I'm an elementary school teacher. That's just that's in my blood. Yeah, I mean, it's such especially right now. I mean, we've obviously having incredible conversations and have been ongoing just about America's healthcare system, its food system, like all of these different things. And it has been a movement. I think that what do they call the hipsters? The hipsters. I remember everybody when people don't like something, they like to label it and then make fun of it, right? And I was like, I remember being like, what's hipster? Like, I don't get it. What is this hipster thing? I'm like, are you guys, you know, because like I'm an old granny or something like that. And I realized it was just people that were like trying to do things. At least the origins of it was people that were just, you know, trying to do things, bringing back some of that old plant magic. And we've had incredible herbalists come out of this community. There's Ashley and Summer wrote Cosmic Kitchen, which is an incredible book. I sell it at my bookstore, Spiral Circle Bookstore. And we've just seen a lot of really cool, truly like galvanizing. I remember talking to Emily Ruff at some point about how like Florida really hadn't come online. The rest of the country had a pretty robust herbal, you know, community, and Florida was just kind of like, you know, and I remember her wanting to take up that mantle and really galvanize, because herbalism, it happens in community. Definitely. Because you're sharing knowledge with each other about what works and what doesn't work, and you consult with each other. Oh, this is what's going on. Has anybody, you know, it's a real connecting kind of practice.
Sure.
And yeah, because we have Ricky here is from South Florida, and I know that there's been a lot of connections through. What are some of the ways people connect? I know one of the big ways is through the Florida Herbal Conference. Let's just dive into that real quick.
Heck yeah, you read my mind.
Yeah.
I was thinking, yeah, I feel like the Florida Herb Conference came out of this idea of giving people a place. For Emily Ruff and Patty, the original directors of that conference really giving people a space to come together. It was 14 years ago, the first herbal conference, and it wasn't a time when you could find your other herbalist in social media lands or in blogs or YouTube or whatever. It was really getting to know people at herb classes and so the Florida Herb Conference came from this place of wanting to give people a place to come together and get to know who else was in their area. We have regional breakouts and classes, and people get exposure to teachers that maybe they wouldn't have heard about before. This year, we're bringing it to a one-day event, and I'm happy, sad about that. I feel like for years, Emily Ruff and myself, and before that, Patty, were really stepping into this place of wanting to hold on to a 3-day event, herb camp,
It's like summer camp for herby people.
Yeah.
It's so much fun.
So much fun. But I'm hoping that we're able to take a little slice of that experience over to Mead Botanical Gardens on March 1st and give folks a chance to spend some time with herbal educators from this whole spectrum. We have a doula coming over from the St. Pete area, and we have a natural nurse coming from New Jersey. So we're going to be experiencing different perspectives, and Ricky's going to come up and do a hands-on workshop on medicine making. And we'll also have Holy River there. They're going to bring some live music. We're all going to spend time shaking our whatever we have.
The booties.
Yeah, together with Holy River playing. And then we will be giving out the Peggy Lance Award. Peggy Lance is a octogenarian plant person who's been in this area teaching about edible plants. Mostly it's edible. You can harvest some local plants
and not just that edible, y'all.
Yeah. We're talking Biden's Alba and
right.
Yeah. Beautyberry.
All of the edibles.
All of the edibles. I don't know if she has a brownie recipe in her book though.
Beautyberry brownies.
That sounds amazing, actually.
I was just thinking about Beautyberry jam.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So if you guys don't know, let's talk about Beautyberry for a second.
Let's do it.
You guys do it because I'm not qualified, really. Who wants to talk about Beautyberry? It's a natural mosquito repellent.
Yeah, you can take the leaf.
Yes.
And
you could tuck it into your arms and legs and if you want, or you can just
rub it together so it opens up some of the essential oils in the plant to make it bug repellent. But it also, Beautyberry has these gorgeous purple berries on them. And what do we know about the color purple in food? What does it give us?
I mean,
antioxidant. Yeah.
Okay,
Totally.
I feel like I'm in class with a quiz and I'm going to pass this right now. My memory recall's not great. Go on.
Antioxidants, that color we know.
Yes.
Is antioxidants.
Those things.
So I can put some beautyberries on some brownies and add some antioxidants, not only from the chocolate, but also from the beautyberries, or decorate a salad. Or I could add a bunch of sugar and call it jam.
Or you can make makeup with it, because that's why it was called Beautyberry, because you could make lipstick with it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I always thought it was called Beautyberry because it has these this kind of astringent. It has this. Oh, that's a difference. I always thought it was called Beautyberry because it has these astringent kind of vulnerary properties. It helps to tonify skin and do the whole the same thing that people use rose water for. Makes the skin kind of feel more plump, makes you more beautiful. But I suppose using the berries as makeup would be fun too.
Yeah.
Dye, yeah. I can paint my face with beautyberries all day.
And they're all around, in the land here in Florida. So there's just so many. There's so many. When you start the herbalist path, you talk about plant allies. Being basically your friends. And they're literally hanging out in your backyard unless you've done that thing where you just take all life out of your yard. But I have a beautyberry like right on the corner of my property, and I'm like, hey, Beautyberry.
Yeah, there are herbalists out there in the folk herbalism traditions that would if you weren't feeling well, they would just come over to your house and hang out, hear about how you're feeling, and then go out in your backyard. and see which plants had showed up to take care of you.
The medicine grows where it's needed, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's often the case that even like it's interesting, like even the most kind of obscure discomforts that people feel, will like the plant that can help them is usually like in their yard if they've allowed their yard to express itself, how it's supposed to, I suppose. But yeah, I find that very interesting that that's something that a lot of people like, are super surprised when we do plant walks. It's like plant walks is part of one of my favorite things because it's like so exciting to see people's excitement when you tell them that this plant that they like sweat over pulling in their gardens or whatever is like so useful and even edible and like medicinal or whatever the case is. And just the excitement of like that realization is so inspiring, and it's like fuels the fire for this wanting to continue spreading this knowledge for people, because it's like this is something that every like 150 years ago everybody would have known Biden's alba.
Right.
But now it's like, we have classes full of people and maybe one or two people have heard of this plant and like the benefits that it has, not only for us, but for the ecology around us and such. So yeah, just it's a fascinating plant.
Yeah.
In that way.
So I am so excited. I could talk about plants forever. And I do want to get to like what's your like go-to, like I have a go-to cold cure, right? So be thinking about something that's like your go-to that you can just give people a little bit of the snippet. But before we do that, I want to remind everyone that you're listening to Front Porch Radio, and we do podcast this. If you go to Substack and just search for Front Porch Radio, you'll find us there. So we'll be posting this episode afterwards. And if this conversation has piqued your curiosity, which is one of the traits I see in both of you, me too, I have curiosity as well. But if it's piqued your curiosity and you just want to like dabble your toe in, March 1st at Mead Botanical Gardens is a one-day Florida Herbal Conference by the Florida School of Holistic Living. Emily Ruff, who's been spoken so highly of here, is the keynote speaker. Holy River, which is an amazing, amazing band, is performing. What else is going to be happening at the conference?
We're going to have vendors from all over Florida bringing in things like tea blends and salves. Actually, the salve that you mentioned earlier will be there.
Coyote's Natural Medicine is the brand there for that.
Yeah. And we will have teachers from all over Florida. Emily Ruff is the only person that's not a Florida teacher. She's coming in from Vermont. We'll have food vendors. We'll have edible medicinal plant walks, if that sounded interesting to you. And we're also, for the first time, going to have a mushroom guy doing a little mushroom walk.
A fungi?
A fungi. Yeah, a fungi guy.
Little plant hero.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the one thing that I'm like, that is my thing. If I'm not feeling well, my kid will bring me lemon balm tea and honey toast. It's like honey and lemon balm. It's like the cure-all at our house. But I have to say, for my nervine friends, Tulsi or holy basil is the thing. I find that it's like a yoga class in a cup. Just brings me.
I love that.
Yeah, it brings me to that place of like focus. It doesn't make me sleepy. It's not necessarily going to get me all hyped up like caffeine or something. And
Yeah, I love Tulsi.
Yeah, also great for a lot of other things, but
Yeah,
my nervous system is the number one.
absolutely. Ricky, what's your go-to?
Oh man. Well, she said Tulsi already. It's honestly like between Tulsi and Libya, which I call Libya alba, lemon balm's big burly brother, just because like lemon balm is this like, low to the ground kind of creeping, lemony tasting plant, whereas like Libya is this like outward growing up and out, almost climbing if it has something to climb kind of lemony plant, but they share very similar constituents and even similar uses. I've even used them kind of interchangeably sometimes when I don't have lemon balm.
Me too.
But Libya, it's just so amazing, not only because like it's nervine properties, but it has like stuff going on with the immune system and the way that it protects cells from viruses invading. And it smells awesome and tastes like Fruit Loops and like can help people sleep and like can help relieve, like I've seen all kinds of things with this plant that's just like so cool. And where I'm at, it's like super, super abundant. Like my patch, like I put a stick in the ground once and now I've got this like, it's like 20 feet by 6 foot tall solid wall of this stuff. And it's like unbelievable how intensely it grows. So it's really happy with me. And so I really like it and it really likes me. And when you mix Tulsi and Lipia together, it's like drinking a cup of Fruit Loops.
I had never heard of Lipia, so I feel very grateful to have.
So I'm in South Florida, right? So we have a lot of Central and South American plant crossover. And Lipia alba is not necessarily a plant that's in a lot of like European and North American Materia Medica books, but it does show up a lot in Central and South America stuff. And they call it like Costa Rica, people call it Juan y Lama. In South America, it's often called pronto alivio, which means like heal quickly, basically, or fast relief. And so yeah, long history of that plant being used for all kinds of all manners of things. And so yeah, I love that plant a lot.
Okay. I've learned something new here today. So one of my interests in herbalism is not just healing people from, what's going on, but I also like to make delicious beverages, which is why I had a tea house. And I'm actually on the cusp of launching a new tea house inside of Spiral Circle Bookstore. And I'm really excited about that. It's going to be a tea garden, actually. And so one of the things that I do love to make is, and you started this talking about coffee. Well, I can't drink coffee because I get headaches when I have caffeine, which is super upsetting. But there's a couple of things that there's all these coffee substitutes and they've never really sat well with me. Like there's this thing called Dandy Blend, which is just too bitter for me. I can't, it's not working for me. But one of the things that I used to help me with my mold exposure was black walnut, which has a really nice, sweet and dark color form. And then I was also introduced to mesquite, which is a tree that mainly grows in Texas, which is where I'm from. And I blend those two things together in order to make like an alternative coffee. And the mesquite is great because it's low glycemic index, but it actually brings in, it actually has a really good, smooth coffee flavor. You just have to be careful. You don't want to drink too much black walnut, but because it's potent. Yes, it's an anti-parasitic. So yeah, I just know it helped me with my gut a lot, but I only had it like once a week during like an acute phase. But yeah, both of those things together made a really delicious alternative coffee.
That sounds lovely.
Mixture. Yeah.
Yeah, the mesquite I've never considered putting mesquite in like a coffee substitute blend.
Yes, they actually make a mesquite coffee. One person makes a mesquite coffee out of somewhere in Texas. Google mesquite coffee. And it's fine actually on its own, but the black walnut really adds another level of smoothness there. So all that and more at the Florida Herbal Conference, March 1st, 2025 at Mead Gardens. Where can people find the Florida Herbal Conference and the Florida School of Holistic Living? Where do we send them? What website?
Holistic Living School is our website. We have a link to the conference there as well. We're in the Meta social media places right now, and our website is really the best source of information.
Yeah. Okay, great. And where can people find your Botanica? It sounds like you do have an online shop because not everybody's traveling all the way to South Florida.
We had the online shop is not up right now. We had that. It's coming. I suppose coming soon. We had everything online, and then just like we had this like uptick in just.
So what you're saying is we have to come visit you.
Yeah. Well,
you can see Ricky in a distillation class on March 2nd.
I'll be on March 2nd
announcing.
Yeah. You heard it first here, folks.
What do you think, Ricky?
We might do camphor. I think we might do camphor. I could bring some Lipia up, but I'm coming from South Florida on Friday. I really like super fresh plant material for distillation, so it would be nice to distill something that was like really recently harvested. I'm still kind of thinking about exactly what we're going to be distilling, but we talked about camphor, which is something that grows like in abundance, and it's extremely aromatic. And so that's a good one. It'd be nice to do Libya because I just talked about it. We don't know yet.
Okay.
But I'll be doing a distillation.
Surprises
I'll be doing a
abound.
distillation demonstration on the day, like an intensive after the conference.
Okay. Yay. Well, thank you both so much for all the work that you do to spread the knowledge and passion for plants in various forms, as well as holistic living. If you're just tuning in and you caught the last, tail end of this, I will be podcasting the whole thing within a couple of days. If you go to Substack and search for Front Porch Radio, I'm like officially doing that, which is a brand new thing for me. And so you'll be able to hear this whole conversation, lots of really good information. Thank you both so much again for being guests on Front Porch Radio.
My pleasure. And Julie, thank you for all the things you do to bring the positivity to our area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. This was super fun.
Yay. All right. You guys stay tuned. More music is on the way.